You're holding up 16 tambourines. Didn't we do an album focus on that?
Well, we did, but today's kind of an interesting show. Because
Okay.
I guess we had some lingering questions.
We did.
And we haven't offered to answer some of those questions.
Who would know the answers to any questions that we might have about 16 tambourines?
Well, you know that there are 4 people in the band.
Oh, I can see. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They would probably know.
We've had an offer from 1, possibly 2 people to answer some questions.
Okay. I'm looking and I'm thinking. All right.
Okay. So, you know, we've had Danny Benair on more than once. He's been so gracious.
Amazing.
We've had Luis Gutierrez on, one of the unicorns.
Yes.
We've had Michael Curcio on various times, talking about different projects.
Yes, we have. Mickey Mariano.
Mariano. We've never had him on.
We have not.
He's on the unicorn list.
He is.
So what do you say, Jeff?
I say we get this started and hope that one of those 4 guys or maybe 2 end up popping on the show.
You know, I'm an optimistic person. So I say let's get started.
Let's get started.
Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff.
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
A podcast where the 2 of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a gruviar.
Let's get groovy. Hello, Mr. Danny.
Hi there.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay. How are you guys?
We're doing well.
There's Mickey, or as Michael, as we would refer to him. I mean, you know.
So I just want to say hello, Michael. This is Soraya and Jeff, and we're just really glad that you joined us today.
Thank you for asking me.
We're very excited. So do we refer to you as Mike, Michael, Mickey?
That's the first question. You can call Danny's going to call me Mickey, so you might as well too.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I mean,
Okay.
the thing with Mickey was it was the name that he got attached because there was a Michael. So, you know, I think when he came in sort of being Mickey, and at the time, you know, I think it wasn't something where he was like, Lewis was the only one who turned from Greg to Lewis. So it wasn't like.
That was funny.
Right.
So my birth name is Michael Mariano, but actually the first band that I was in with Danny, which was called the Falcons, they gave a couple of us nicknames because the image of the Falcons was to be like sort of a West Side Story type image.
Wow.
And so our singer, who was Marty Zucker, we changed his name to Marty Martino. and then my name from Mike Mariano changed to Mickey Mariano. So Danny and his parents, who I knew well, always called me Mickey. It was like a nickname that stuck. And when I got into 3 o'clock, there was already a Michael, and so sometimes somebody in the band would say, "Hey, Mike," and both Michael Curcio and myself would turn our heads and go, "What?" So they said, "Look, let's just call you Mickey, so it's not so confusing." You know.
So that's your street gang name.
Exactly. Exactly. That's my band name.
I mean, I call him Mickey, but if Mickey said to me one day on the phone and said, like, "Don't ever call me Mickey again."
Oh no, I don't mind. I answer to either Mickey or Mike. It's fine.
Okay.
Right. No, I get it. I mean,
or Michael.
Also, I think the length of our relationship is sort of at this point.
He's always called me that. So
right.
Yeah.
So Danny, it's either Mickey or Honey, right? I mean, you guys have known each other so long, so I would imagine something. So Soraya, do you want to do a little introduction now that we know who, because we kind of teased at the beginning of our episode, but we didn't say who was coming on.
Yeah. So
okay.
So for our listeners today, we are joined once again by the great Danny Benair, but also by the one and only Mickey Mariano, also known as Michael Mariano. But this is just a thrill. It's such a thrill to have you on and to talk about some songs that are so important to us.
Well, so that makes us very excited. It makes me excited. I'm glad you're thrilled because that makes me thrilled too.
Oh my gosh. Our listeners are plotzing right now. They're having a moment.
Okay.
For sure.
So Soraya, a couple weeks ago, we did an episode on 16 tambourines, and I might note that we have Christmas colors because today is a gift for us. So we are wearing
Oh,
Christmas
yeah.
colors because it's a gift.
I see, it's
Hey.
very, very seasonal.
Yeah.
So Soraya, a couple weeks ago, we did have an episode where we were talking and we were focusing on the album 16 Tambourines in particular.
Right.
And we didn't know a whole lot. There was a lot of things that came up that we didn't know what we were talking about, but we just love the album. I think we both
Thank you.
shared that we both have multiple copies of this album. My favorite copy is my Japanese pressing that I had signatures from everybody except for Mickey. My copy that I had signed by the whole band at a in-store appearance that the band did in Encinitas, California is long gone. And Soraya's got a copy signed by the entire band.
All four.
Yes.
Cool.
So
The original.
I'm very jealous.
Yep. I even have illustrations on mine.
You do, indeed. So we do have a
Right.
couple questions for you guys because you guys are the insiders and you know about this album much more than we do.
Sure.
So the band, as we know, came out of the ashes of what was the Salvation Army band. And Troy Howe leaves the band, Danny joins the band, Mickey's in the band, and you guys do a single, did some stuff at Radio Tokyo, and then Baroque Hoedown.
Well, no, that's backwards.
Okay.
Well, sort of, I joined the band, and then I convinced Lewis, who wants to hold off on getting a keyboard player for 6 months. And I tell him, but that 6 months we won't have a keyboard player. And I knew from seeing Salvation Army record and seeing them live, they had an organ that they used, But, it was like Lewis was trying to play organ and guitar at the same time. And so I suggested Mickey, but we played probably, I don't know how many gigs we played without Mickey. We played a handful of gigs as a 3-piece, still as Salvation Army. And then Mickey joined pretty quickly. Am I right on that, Mickey?
Oh, yeah. And I actually went and saw you guys play as the Salvation Army and as a 3-piece at the Sweetwater.
Right.
Yeah, so that was before I joined the band. You were telling me about the band, and I had just left, or I prior to joining Salvation Army, I was working with Great Buildings, who later formed, 2 of those guys went on to form the Rembrandts. And that band kind of dissolved. And Danny, I was talking to Danny, and he said, "We're going to play a show. Why don't you come and check it out?" So I went and saw them actually play as a 3-piece, as a Salvation Army.
And then so Danny, at that point, it was your idea to bring him in a little bit earlier than Lewis wanted, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, I just knew when I joined, which was bizarre because we never even had, my rehearsal was, my audition was me joining the band, and I didn't even realize on the spot the day I joined wasn't even an audition. It was basically like Michael telling me that we have a gig in 3 weeks. All right. I want to record an EP in the fall. Okay. And this was like late June. It was like July 23rd was the first gig we played as a 3-piece. And I just realized that, I knew Mickey's ability. Mickey came from a theory background. He was the most technically musical person that would come into the band. So he could I knew if he came in, he could say to Michael, "Do you want it on this way or do you want it that way, the chords?" And Michael would go, "That would be great." So what happened, everything happened fast because I think when Mickey saw us, he also realized that the band was happening. The band had stuff going on. And if he wanted to join, it was kind of an expedited situation, if I'm correct.
You are correct. Yeah. Michael and Lewis really, as you know, they were like the core of the band, who were in Salvation Army together, and their songwriting really, the 2 of them working together formed the core of the music of the band. And they were younger than us. They were like, were they 19 and 20 maybe?
I don't know. They were definitely younger, and me being the adult.
Yeah, and you and I were maybe in our early mid 20s, 23, 24, 25. So Danny and I had actually had more experience playing shows, playing live, working in the studio and stuff like that. Just a few years more, and they were, for them, it was a lot of it was new, and they were young. So it was kind of when I auditioned, they were still called the Salvation Army, and that changed shortly afterwards, after a notice from the real Salvation Army. But it was kind of like putting together two guys who had a little bit more experience and slightly older, and two younger guys who had a lot of were really creative, had a lot of great ideas, but they didn't have quite as much of the experience. And we meshed the two together, and I always liked that, because some of the newness that they had, being a little bit younger, and some of the rawness, I thought was a good thing for the band. And Danny and I add a little bit of polish, so it kind of blended. It kind of balanced out a little bit, you know.
I like that a lot. It sounds like
Yeah.
In my work environment, we try to put together teams that are kind of like that, where we have the fresh faces come in on the team, and then we have the experience, and that combination makes into a good team. So it sounds like that really helped out with the 3 o'clock. For me, Mickey, you mentioned that Michael and Louis were like the core of the band. I always thought of the 3 o'clock kind of like I think of the Beatles, where there's 4 people that are equally important across the board, and all 4 personalities make it as a whole. So I always looked at the band as the 4 key important members.
It was really, I think so, Jeff. Because each band member had their kind of role and contributed in different ways. So the 4 of us, I think, had a chemistry together, and each brought kind of different things. So, and also we were talking about Michael and Louis being kind of young. I remember playing some shows live, and I'm sure Danny remembers, where they were too young because of drinking age to actually be in the club.
Well,
so
there was definitely one in San Diego with Michael. I think Louis was already 21, but Michael, I think, was 20 or maybe younger. I don't know. There was something.
Yeah, they let him on stage.
A little bit older than Michael, but Michael, it was, what's the club in San Diego? I can't remember, but literally the van was next to the door. Michael, when they said you're going on, Michael came out of the van, walked on stage, set finished, he got back in the van.
Wow.
There was no moment.
He couldn't hang around in the club after playing on the stage, because, you know, liquor laws, you know, he had to be over 21 to be inside that club.
And that was their strict thing. I mean, certainly we played a lot of places very early on where nobody cared about age. I mean,
did that happen in another state as well, where Michael had to could play the show on stage, but then had to leave the club?
I don't really recall. I also think a lot of venues, if they're set up for 21 and younger, if you get stamped, you know, there's that whole, you know, you can be in a club if you have a stamp if you're underage. So, so there was that. I mean, it blossomed rather quickly, because going back to how, you know, where we got to, because first of all, there were a few songs. Michael, I think, already had Marjorie Tells Me, and he had Cantaloupe Girlfriend, and he wanted to do Sorry, and then he tried it when we joined, and I think I created the feel that what it became.
The shuffle,
And then Mickey would always sort of confide in me, because he didn't really, I was sort of the middle person, I guess, at first. So Mickey came to me, and he'd been tweaking with the riff to I Go Wild. I think he took apart the riff for the last time by the Stones, upwards, downwards, backwards, forwards. And then he played it for me and asked me what I thought.
Wow.
And I thought it was really cool. And then he brought it to Michael and Louis, and they instantly grabbed onto it. But he was very, Mickey wrote really important songs in the 3 o'clock.
Well, I didn't write them. I collaborated with Michael and Louis.
Okay, but
you know, brought in a piece of an idea.
Right, but I would say that, you know, if you don't come in with the idea for Jet Fighter and I have the drum beat, then it doesn't go on with the song.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I started a ball rolling.
Right. The germ came from, and then I'm not taking away anybody's ability and talent, but it was like Mickey had this riff, which then light bulbs went off because they weren't coming from Michael or Louis. So that was
Michael and Louis were always really receptive. to other people introducing, musical ideas in the band. And they were very quick on stuff too. And Danny was quick on stuff too. I mean, in rehearsal, Danny would, somebody would start playing, the music or whatever, and the drum beat would happen very quickly, within a minute or two. And I tend, being a keyboard player and being kind of methodical, I tended to hem and haw and stay after rehearsals were over and try to figure out what I wanted to play.
Yeah.
That's true. It's very true.
That's me.
So it sounds like Baroque Hoedown, then kind of, Danny, especially since you set up that timeline, Michael had these quick plans. So it sounds like Baroque Hoedown was already kind of in process.
In Michael's right, Soraya. In Michael's mind, Baroque Hoedown, he wanted to do an EP, and I suggested Earl because I'd had a long relationship with Earl, and that instantly, Earl loved Michael's voice. He really liked the band, and we went in with a few songs already, and then we were pretty. I mean, by the time we came around to make the record, I mean, we had the songs already. We had other songs, but I mean, those 5 plus Feel a Whole Lot Better, which we recorded at the same time. That was done. We were prepared. We were always prepared. We were never slack on rehearsing. I mean, we rehearsed constantly.
How long would you say after I joined that we recorded Baroque Hoedown? Was it like 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, probably. I mean, not long.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was pretty quick.
The band's new identity really morphed very quickly because Mickey and myself brought something to Michael and Lewis's strength that married it that could have failed. I mean, it could have failed if it was the wrong 2 guys, but it was sort of like, I think, our longer experience, like Mickey had pointed out, and their creativity and kind of openness to trying
freshness.
It melded in a way that completely changed what Salvation Army was, because that was rough and ready, and there wasn't a lot of technicality going on. It was sort of like Lewis had a fuzz box and an amp that leaned like the Tower of Pisa, and Troy backed away, and Michael was the root. He held it down with his very solid bass playing. His timing was so spot on. But within months, I mean, Lewis went from sort of a noisy guitar player to like being extraordinarily talented and upped his game in like months. It blew me away.
Yeah, if you listen to the guitar work on the Salvation Army record and the guitar work on 16 Tambourines, or even Baroque Hoedown, it's hard to believe that that's the same guitar player.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, his whole riff and guitar thing for Stupid Einstein, it's fabulous. And the way Earl recorded it always made me, the only word I can think of, I made up a word, it's autumny. It makes me think of like, the fall and leaves in a fireplace. It's got this very unique sound to it, and the guitar playing on it is fabulous.
He came, remember he was in the punk band the Oziers, remember?
Yeah.
And he came from a punk background just, when he was young. And but he was also a big fan of like Steve Howe of Yes, and also classical guitar playing. He liked that kind of stuff quite a bit, which he's, over the years, he's developed that side. But that's kind of what you hear, this guy who has kind of a new wave punkish background, but also is a fan of classical and even prog rock stuff. So that kind of things that you were talking about, the way he plays on 16 Tambourines and Baroque Hoedown and Arrive Without Traveling, that's what you're hearing, this guy who kind of blended the punk stuff or new wave stuff with the kind of progressive, almost classical guitar stuff.
Wow. It definitely helped make the sound that you guys did as a band very unique.
Yeah.
And I don't say this in any way as a slight, because obviously Lewis is really fantastic, but Mickey joining up the bar and Lewis couldn't not that Louis procrastinated anyway. Louis was very methodical like Mickey. He worked and worked and worked on parts. But when Mickey joined, he realized, you know what? This guy's really good. And the bar's been risen, So he knew that to complement everybody else, he had to take the time and really, it wasn't just hitting chords in a fuzz box. And I remember for the best. I mean, to me,
I remember, speaking of their punk backgrounds in their early days, Michael and Louis, I remember that Michael or Louis telling us or me one day where we were rehearsing that they were playing a show in somebody's house or just playing a gig in somebody's house, and El Duce was there and he was throwing up on Michael's shoe or something.
Oh, wow.
I've heard that
from drinking too much.
Wow.
So that's where they came out of. But and myself, Danny had played a lot. Of course, he'd worked with the Quick and stuff like that. And I had actually, prior to joining rock bands, I had played in top 40 bands. So I played like weddings, like on weekends, like, sometimes 3 weddings in a weekend.
Wow.
Month in, month out. So I'd played a lot. Danny had played a lot. And then, like I said, Michael and, they were just 19, 20, whatever. I mean, when I was their age, I was new. I was fresh just the way they were, So
and Mickey, from you playing those weddings, we can't get you all in here.
yeah.
That's where that comes from. That is for a Day in Erotica. That's a tape of Mickey's from when he was like 14 or something, playing in a top 40 band, and we took that loop.
What?
That, in Erotica, there's that woman that's That's what the tape of Mickey's, and Earl made a loop of "We Can't Get You All in Here" of some woman at some part. Is that right, Mickey?
Yeah, it's one of the first gigs I played. I was 14 years old, and we weren't actually the band playing the wedding. The drummer's parents had the band, and they played the main stuff for the wedding, and then they brought us out to play a few songs or something like that. So I was like 14 years old. I was the lead singer. We barely could play our instruments, and I have a cassette tape of that, and I brought it to Earl's studio when we were recording 16 Tambourines, and he played some of that cassette recording of our band of the wedding, and some of it's just not even the band playing, it's just people talking and sitting at the table eating dinner and stuff like that.
Well, you hear the plates being moved. I mean, I don't know what happens to that, because I mean, that song, Michael changed the melody, and there was already a melody down, and Earl said, "No, leave it. Put your counter melody." And then he came in with with the cassette where you hear dishes being played, and then the woman, "I can't get you all in here," and Earl's like, "Yes." And then
it's a woman trying to take a photo at the wedding. So she said, "I can't get you all in the picture."
Oh.
And then the crying at the beginning is Earl's kid, who now uses Earl's studio totally. But that was him crying in the backyard, and we just said, "Leave it on," which was very typical of how we, even though we crafted 16 Tambourines.
We're trying to be that was a very quote unquote psychedelic track, that's for sure.
Yeah. So when we got to making 16 Tambourines, and between 16 Tambourines and Arrive Without Traveling is when we went to Radio Tokyo. And Ethan James came to us and said, "I just need one song, but you can record 3 and you can have the others." So we gave him, did we give him All Good Time or In Love and Two? I can't remember.
All Good Time.
Okay, we gave him All Good Time, and then we used In Love and Two and Loose for Sam. And we did a Rodney commercial. We did all those. He was a very nice guy, and he let us do it. It was between records, so we had this fan club single, and then Lisa, I think, sent them out to the French record to make Broco Down a bigger record in France. And on Lucifer Sam, I mean, all that weird talking, again, it's a weird happenstance. It was a ham radio coming through Lewis's amp.
Oh, wow.
Which happens.
And it was like, we just got to leave it. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And so it was coming in. And I think one of the words, and I think we flipped it around, was the guy going boring. Something like that. It was really weird. But that was what led us to 16 Tambourines, which was obviously, I know it's what you really wanted to talk about. And
Yeah.
And that, you know, we spent a lot of time, you know, we'd already toured. We already started getting a buzz. Michael already called this thing to Paisley Underground. The first song that was written for the record was Around the World.
Oh.
And we played it live. Yeah, we played it live, and what we would do is we would open our set with songs like this. Oh, we loved Around the World so much, and so that was the first song we cut for the record, I think. And it doesn't, you know, then like at the 19th hour of 20, Michael and Lewis decide one day, we don't want it on the record. They never really gave an explanation as to why. They just decided one day they didn't. And that was how In My Own Time ended up on the record.
Because we had been doing In My Own Time live. But we hadn't necessarily thought about putting it on the record at all. But we had been playing it live. And when Around the World was cut, we needed something to put in its place. And it turned out to be In My Own Time.
And also there was a very big deal about that was that Earl just didn't want to do it. Earl said, you're not just going to do it and it's going to be the Bee Gees. If you're going to do it, we're going to change it. And I think we should do a brass version. And we'd already done the brass with you know, the other stuff. So Earl wanted to create a brass version that would sort of, that would make it unique. Because
actually what happened on that, I'm gonna contradict you there, Dan, because Earl said, how can we do this song and make it different from the Bee Gees version? And I said, well, it's got kind of a funky groove, so you put horns on it. And Earl said, that sounds good.
Then there you go.
That's how it happened.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fine. I just knew that for us to do In My Own Time, especially the majority of time we played it live, there was a period where we had the horn section in LA where we would do a few songs. But
yeah,
you know, it's much closer to like a faster version of the Bee Gees version. But that was what we tried to steer away from, was just to cover the Bee Gees version. And we didn't look at we had other older songs that for whatever reason, we didn't go back to. You know, instead of pulling an original, we just did a cover, which I don't know. I don't remember us even considering any of the songs that we had dropped from sets that exist but never were recorded. So that was the last thing that was definitely recorded.
So can I ask how the horn section came into being in the first place? I think the first time that I saw the band play, you were touring for 16 Tambourines, and it was I believe it was at UCSD in a gym, or San Diego State, probably San Diego State University actually. And you had the horn section there, and for a college rock band at the time, a live performance with a horn section was, unless you were Oingo Boingo, was not something that you would see.
Right. I think I think what the thought was, I think we might have done a few gigs to the general public or something like that. And we were making good money. And because I remember, I think we did like 3 days in a row. And I think we took the horn section. I think one of the gigs was like in, Riverside or somewhere like that, and LA, and I guess San Diego. And we must have figured out that we could do it with the horn section. So I know at one point we did Savoy Truffle to add horns and lightning starts. And I know at one point we did Satisfaction with the Bangles. We sort of did the Stones version meets the Otis Redding version, and the Bangles as background singers and the horns. So I know we found reasons to use the horns because we were not a horn band at all.
No, but we looked at it probably like as, Sergeant Pepper has some tracks with horns on it or something like that, or, it worked with those songs, So, and it was fun live. We had, I'm sure you remember Mike Barbera, Danny.
Yes.
Who was a saxophone player who I met, I think, through Danny Wild when I was in Great Buildings. And I brought him, he played on 16 Tambourines. And we had some other people that had played on that record as well. Besides Mike, we had a trombone player and a trumpet player. And they were fun guys. So, to bring them out, it was a lot of fun for us too. So,
well, and also like when we played the Palace, which was rare. I mean, we only played there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. There was always like the big LA show for us, and it was the show, like the first time we headlined and like it oversold, and we made a lot of money, which was in today's terms was probably no money, but then it seemed like a lot of money, and the place was oversold, and we didn't know if like 300 kids would show up. That was when we realized we could do these shows, and not only would we make money, but we would also it'd be like the best way we could present ourselves. So that was like, let's bring the horns in. We can do the horns. Or I know one of them we used all these blow up balloons behind us. I'd love to find those photos because they're really great. It's so simple. We just got a helium machine and they had these giant balloons behind us, and it's very simple, but it looked really cool.
The first Palace show that we did, the Palace held 1,200 people, and they actually oversold it and put 1,300 people in there, which they're not supposed to do because of fire marshal laws, but they put 1,300 people in there, and then they were still turning people away. Wow. My cousin couldn't get in. He had to buy like a scalper's ticket,
Yeah, so the making of the record was very group oriented, and that should be stressed because I know, like you brought up when you talked about 16 Tambourines, you brought up Fall to the Ground, and everything about the instrumentation of that bam, dum, 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 was very deliberate. And I had an idea, and it was Lewis and I did it, and it's sort of low in the mix, but I had Lewis play a big marching drum, and I played crash cymbals like in a marching band. Right. So it's like, so when you see her fall to the ground, that part, Lewis would be going bang bang, and I was going psh, psh. And that was in the mix. We did lots of weird things where, like Earl would say yes to anything. He was like, "You want to try it? Try it." That was always his. He never wanted to not allow us to attempt something like that.
The band had a lot of luxury with Earl because instead of studio time, you paid him a flat rate per song, and then you could take as much time as you wanted until the songs were done.
Oh wow!
7 years later, no.
So within reason, you couldn't take 5 months or whatever like that. But you weren't paying him by the hour or anything like that. You just pay him a flat rate per song, and then so that way that let us just kind of, it was luxury so that we could take our time and make sure everything was right. Some of the string players that we had on the record, we got some students from Cal State Northridge
And
uh,
Will Glenn.
and Will Glenn from the Rain Parade, and they played some string parts on Tomorrow and on My Own.
And the thing was, Earl's studio, which he says he's retired, and I'll take him at his word. I've talked to him many times, but his studio changed from the days of then, where when we recorded our first 2 records there, my drums were set up in the kitchen, and Michael his bass would be in the living room. Mickey would be in there was a little space in the control room. He could set up there, but you couldn't set up the whole band the way Earl's setup is now, like when we did 3x4. There's a whole back studio. Okay. But I do recall his wife Jerry, when we were doing A Day in Erotica, the beginning, there's a triangle right at the beginning. And I had a pillow, and I had it all set up so I could hit the triangle before I came in, and I threw the triangle on the pillow, and we started the song, and Jerry comes in with groceries, which was 100% common. This happened all the time. So here comes Jerry. She looks nonplussed. She comes in with her groceries. We continue playing. We don't stop. It's probably the take we use. Probably if you took all the mics down and found one of the stairs or floor, you probably could hear Jerry, putting away, bags of groceries. But wow. That was very much how it was done. The drums were in the kitchen. So
yeah, in his house, and I think his studio was in his guest house, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the parts of the studio. I mean, that's where the tack piano for Tomorrow was.
Yeah.
That you use. That piano in Tomorrow is a tack piano that Earl owned that Mickey played.
Oh, you'll discover a sound of street to town. We can hang around, but will it be tomorrow? And if the scenes that we have found, they turn your head around, then we will stay tomorrow. 'Cause when it's time to stay. But sometimes we hear me say,
The Earl was very cool because he had played guitar in Sparks, 2 early records. He's actually on the records, and then he worked for a number of years at the Beach Boys brothers studios. He'd worked with engineering some Beach Boys records. He worked with Brian Wilson, so he had a lot of experience. Very creative, producer, engineer, but he can work with seasoned studio veterans. He had that kind of ability, but he also loved working with new young bands, and almost he loves the role of being a teacher. So he takes the band at the level that they're at, and he helps them to be able to get a good sound in the studio, and he likes to teach them to help them grow, and he loves it. He loves to watch bands grow and stuff like that. And I mentioned that to him. I said, even though you could do this, you really seem to enjoy, working with bands at whatever level they're at, and getting them to get a good sound. And you know what he said to me? He said, absolutely, just like that. So that was his thing, that he really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you never got Earl mad. I never saw, in my whole life, I've never saw Earl angry.
Never made him mad, made him laugh a lot though.
Well, laughing, that's great. I was trying to think of something about the how he recorded. I mean, he had certain instruments that we had access to. He had certain amps and guitars and keyboards. Like he had a Leslie that was from Sparks. It was Ron Mayles.
Well, the 16 Tambourines was recorded on a 16-track that Brian Wilson used to own.
Right.
That was the Earl had purchased the 16-track board from Brian Wilson.
And the beginning of Jet Fighter is a mistake. That gene, that's a mistake.
It's a little blip. Yeah, a little recording
blip. And Earl's like, yeah, Earl has a phrase for that, but Earl's like lightning bolt. We're leaving it, you know.
So that's when it does that.
Yeah. It sounds like it's something that the guitar was playing, but then the tape kind of sped up a little bit, and it somehow it recorded the little speeding up of the guitar note, and it was at the beginning of the track. You get kind of little weird, you know, anomalies like that when you're working in the studio. But that was one that was actually left in on the recording.
Gosh.
Yeah, Earl, you know, it wasn't something that was manipulated. Let's put it there. It was there. And then Earl like realized this is magic, you know, there's something unique about it. It's a sound that catches your attention. And
yeah, and Earl was the one who wanted to add the sound effects to Jet Fighter, like the air raid sirens at the end, and the explosion, and the pilot to co-pilot talking, and various things.
Myself.
Me and Michael were looking at each other going, sound effects, you know, on a rock song, you know, you have to, you don't really know. I mean, as they started laying stuff down and I started listening to it, I said, yeah, I see how these things kind of work for the song, you know. I remember a review in LA Weekly, I think, by Craig Lee, and he said it kind of reminded him of Sky Pilot by the Animals, you know. So
well, I think I recall when we first were going to do the voices, and it was Lewis was like ground control and I was the pilot.
That's right.
And
that was fun.
And
you guys are cracking this
Michael
up,
was cringing, and we just did it. But the funny thing was, I know a couple of the words we say because I remember, but there's no way unless you took that track up and listened. Like I think one phrase I say is no problem, no problem. And then I think the last words I say is, oh my God, right before the explosion. But yeah, that was something where, you know, it could have really like just swung.
Could have been tacky.
You know.
Was it scripted or were you guys improving?
Oh no.
We were ad-libbing.
Yeah.
I think actually
me and Michael were off. I was off at the side like laughing because they were just like goofing off. You know, this is stuff we do while we traveling on the road in the van, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody would get on some kind of a, you know, be goofing off, you know, talking about somebody else look at that person in that car or whatever, and cracking jokes or whatever. That's what Danny and Lewis were doing.
On the road of us talking with like accents. And that's probably like, you know, so I was probably doing like partial Russian accent, you know. It was probably like, no problem, you know. But yeah, we probably did a few takes, and then it sort of didn't matter because, you know, now it's like Mickey mentioning that there's the sound effects and the voices. It's like it's so like blended in my mind, like I don't even think it's there. And also, I don't really think about Jet Fighter because I know it's a song that people really know of ours, unless you live, of course, in the Philippines, and then it's on paper, which is a whole other world. But it's so like I've played it so many times. I mean, I could walk right now and play it somewhere if I had to. But I kind of, I guess, in a way, that's the one I probably think about the least because I've heard it so much. Whereas, you know, the other ones were more, it was more fine-tuned, you know, what we were playing and how we were doing it and the tempos. And, you know, I know you had mentioned a few songs on your program, and I was trying to remember, there were some things you mentioned, and I wish I'd written it down. So
I wrote a couple things down. Stupid Einstein was one of the songs that I played, and I was cracking up at the line, feel and go through you.
Right.
Because yeah, in the paint box, I remember them sending out when there was some sort of contest that I entered and lost, but I think you guys printed some of the responses that people had, some of the submissions, and somebody said that feel and go through you was the "and" stood for acid. The A in "and" was like feel the acid go through you.
You know, that's a sort of like, that's a sort of like that Michaelisms where, just how he writes. But I mean, I'm sure you've heard the old Waldorf or any of the live stuff from that period. I mean, that song starts out where, the chorus is like, no more friends. There's that other version which is really up tempo and it's it's just this like kind of strumming, and that's how we play it for a while. It doesn't become the riff for a while. It just kind of has that playing ding 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 ding, and that's how we play it for a while. And the chorus is sort of like no more friends. So there is this version very early on that's what Stupid Einstein becomes, which is much more acoustic and autumny, as I like to say.
Yeah.
But my version is, I mean, if you notice that record is not a very big guitar record. There's guitars on everything, but it's not like.
The guitars are more delicate, I would say.
Yeah, it's a record that I think when it first came out, it's sort of a lot of kids didn't like it because we came from being Salvation Army to Broke Hoedown, which is still pretty raucous, and then you get to 16 Tambourines, which is kind of our adult record. We're being sort of adults. I mean, we're making a record and we're crafting all the tunes and. We're adding little, I know that on, what's a song that closes the album?
Seeing is Believing.
Yeah, right. And I added claves, which those wooden blocks, you got that, and Mickey Kate created this like almost like marimba or something keyboard part.
Shapes in your eyes, all I can see. To mean so much to me. Halfway there, sent flying through the air. How your eyes can temper me.
It's a weird song that I don't even know if we played more than once. I mean, it's one of those songs where we never really played it live. Again, it's got that a cool acoustic guitar thing going on. It's something we really never incorporated a bunch into our live set. But we spent a lot of time on every song in that. There's no song on that record that we didn't put a lot of time into. Even the rhythm tracks might have come fast, but the songs as a whole. Mickey can probably talk about a lot of his parts. I know Soraya.
I think the record at one point, I think when we were trying to work up songs for the record, I remember Danny, you saying, we need a couple more up-tempo songs because there's a lot of slower songs, but we need a couple more up-tempo things, So, and that's the way the collection of songs kind of came together. And then when they took Around the World out, which was an up-tempo song, you're even left with even more. But I think one of the last songs that we wrote that we came up with for the record was Jet Fighter.
Mickey, can we talk about how that song starts? Because my understanding is that you were instrumental in getting that song off the ground.
Well, I thought that I Go Wild, which had turned out well, which was the first, for me, it was the first time I'd ever collaborated and had a song on a record, So I said to myself, well, let me try and do it again. So I worked for a couple weeks and came up one one evening with just a chord pattern and a little riff over the chord pattern and a bass part as well. And I brought that in, and I wasn't really sure what part
to
of the
back up. I mean, the thing is, Mickey was very apprehensive about anything he would play, and he would tell me he'd have an idea. It's like somebody saying, "I've got a secret," but then like, "Oh yeah, well, let's go on." So he would tell me, "I have an idea."
Okay, so if you introduce a musical idea like that, and it's not that great, or it's not received that well, then you go back to the drawing board. So I would usually, if I came up with something, I'd put it onto a cassette and I'd like listen back, the next morning or whatever, and try to make sure this doesn't sound like too much like anything else, right? To convince myself of that. And then also, is this really something that's strong enough that I want to show into the band? So I had come up with this little pattern one evening, and I talked to Danny on the phone. And I said, "I think I got something." And Danny said, "Play it for me." And I said, "No, wait," because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to show it.
You didn't play it.
Until I'd been comfortable with it myself.
Right.
And I said, but I'll tell you, I said, it is up tempo. So then I brought the cassette.
You brought the cassette, which sat between you and me, and you were driving that day. We were driving. We had started our rehearsals in Panorama City, where my parents lived, and then we moved to Carson, to Lewis's rumpus room. And Mickey was driving that day, and he had the cassette and he played it. And he had the was it the ding 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 ding.
Right. Like I said, it was a chord pattern with a little riff over the chord pattern, and it had bass.
So I just went on my legs. I went, I went literally, like I said, it sounds like to me like the Rolling Stones Between the Buttons. I thought it sounded like Nicky Hopkins.
Right.
And we got to rehearsal, and then I think you showed it.
So what happened was they were working on some songs, and then Danny said, "Mickey's got an idea." So I went to the piano, and Lewis was standing over me at the piano, and I played it for him. And right away Lewis goes, "I have a verse for that." And I thought, "Oh, that's a good sign," because number one, I wasn't sure what part of the song it should be, whether it should be a chorus or a verse or an intro. So he already identified it. He goes, "I have a verse for that. That means he wants that to be a chorus." So I thought that's a good sign, number one. Number two, by saying he has a verse for it, that means he likes it and he wants to use it. So, and that's always, when you show something to people that you're working with, if they start playing along with it and get into it, then you've probably brought something in that might be something that's good. If you show it to the guys and they go, "Well, let's work on that a little bit later today," or "Let's go have lunch," then it's something that maybe it's not going to work, So the fact that Lewis liked it, and he and I, what we did was, I said, "Okay," I said, "we can put." I had written my pattern starting on E, and he showed me his verse, which started on A, and I said we could put them both in A, and it would sound like this. And I played them together. And then I said, we can leave yours in A and start mine on E, and it would sound like this. And he goes, "Yeah, just like that." So he and I had actually written something, not even talking with each other, although the band was all working on, trying to come up with ideas and be creative as possible at that time. And it just happened that he and I wrote, each in a key that fit together. Although I have to say, for a guitarist to come up with something in the key of A and a keyboard player coming up with something in the key of E, those are very common rock and roll keys,
Yeah.
So we put the two together. Michael goes, "Okay, what do you guys got there?" So we played it for Michael, and he started jumping up and down. He going, at the time, we were talking about the band, The Unclaimed, who was very, very retro and very heavily into what we call cave 60s grunge garage rock.
Oh yeah.
And if something had a real primitive pounding kind of groove to it, we call it cave. And Michael, me and Lewis, when we played him, the two patterns that we had put together, Michael walked up to the microphone and started jumping up and down saying, "It's Cave, it's Cave." I mean, it's really pounding, you know?
I swear that on the turntable that there was the Nas song, there was the Nas record that had "When I Get My Plane." I swear to God that Michael, that plane came as like subtle reference, but I had the drum beat, I had the break drum beat. And the one thing as a drummer, even though I'm not a major songwriter, that I learned over time, I had learned in Sorry, the way we would use it on stage. A lot of times we'd have me start the beat. People really like that. If you have a strong beat, people acknowledge it. So I knew that the Jet Fighter beat, I knew the bam, 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 bam.
Yeah.
I knew that if the song was strong, that was like you were fishing and you went, bam, we got him. And
I told a buddy of mine about the Cave thing. He's a guitar player. He said to me, I like Cave. It's kind of a universal boom, boom. It's just a, a rock and roll pounding thing. It's kind of universrsal.
That song's almost complete within, I mean, we made a cassette of it that, or I made a cassette of it that day because I taped over Dave Edmonds. I put tape on there so we could make a copy. We were ecstatic. We just thought there was something about this that was different. I remember us liking Around the World. I remember us liking a lot of songs that we came up with. I Go Wild, all of them. But there was something about this where we just, all the four of us got excited in a way that I'd never seen us get excited. And when we finished that day, we basically had the song. And then not that long after that, we went and played a gig in San Diego. And we said, oh, we got to play it. And we put it somewhere on our set. And then we were like, this is going to be great. The song finished and like 3 people go, like,
yeah,
we were
that's true. Nobody applauded.
Nobody got it. And we were like, what? We were so dismayed by the complete lack of enthusiasm. It didn't interfere with our enthusiasm, but we thought instantly anybody else would get this. Because even though it was the band we were in, we had learned songs and we thought they were good. It's not like if we learned like on my own, it wasn't like we said, oh, this is a bad song. We knew we had a good song on our hand, but Jet Fighter was the one where we kind of like definitely freaked out. And to play it live the first time and have like 3 people applaud was so disheartening. Because we knew there was something there that was different. And I don't know.
I remember Michael when he started singing at the microphone, literally the words just started coming out of his mouth, which is the way he writes a lot of times. And then he turned to me and he said, I have to write this down because I don't want to forget it. It's really good.
Wow.
So, and Michael we had actually done a song about airplanes when I first joined the band. It was called Visions of Airplanes. And it was a very kind of
airplane fares.
What's that?
Was Visions of Airplane Fares.
Okay, and it was very kind of moody, like
well, it was very much like Alone Again.
The Birds.
Love.
What? Oh yeah, like Love. It reminded me a little bit of 8 Miles High by the Birds, although not as rock and roll. Very kind of moody and atmospheric. And we eventually pushed that song aside. But Michael, Michael's an airplane fan. I mean, when we tour and stuff like that, and we'd pass an airfield or whatever, he'd go, that plane has a 737 engine. That one so he knows a lot of stuff about airplanes. He could talk, engine size and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So he was a fan, and I think when he heard the music, he thought, oh, I could write an airplane song around that.
And the funny thing, like the Visions of Airplane Fares is kind of a cool song, and
it's a good song.
We tried to go back to it a couple times, and for whatever reason, it kind of had these unique harmonies, kind of birdsy, like he says, and it had kind of cool guitar stuff. And
you can definitely put on a black light while listening to it and smoke a little, burn some incense. It's really kind of moody with these Birds type vocals, and it's kind of like Love, like you say, with the arpeggio guitar. It's really a cool song.
Yeah, it's probably the first song I learned before Mickey was even there. They showed me the song. I have a tape of it from the second rehearsal. I have a tape of that, like 4 or 5 songs we taped because I wanted to be able to remember these things. And I know that like later on in the band, maybe after Lewis left, we tried it again. And for whatever reason, we just felt like we couldn't wrap our head around, like we were missing something about its specialness because it was kind of cool, but I think we just didn't know how to get to it. But yeah, Mickey's right.
Alone, remember, it's kind of a little, reminds me a little bit of Alone Again or by Love.
Wow.
You know, it has that very soft, moody, you know, kind of, it's a slower song, but it's really, it's pretty song, pretty melody too.
Yeah, no, it's something I, you know, it's one of those I know we came back to and we just never did. But yeah, it's true. And then, oh, and then there's the other one that we demoed for Forever After, Armed Forces Day Parade. So
Oh, yeah.
you've even got another airplane reference.
Yeah, yeah. Michael likes his airplanes, definitely.
Yeah, so we even that one we demoed and it was sort of an elaborate song and we almost got to doing it on Ever After, but that was another airplane song.
Danny, you were talking about harmonies, and that's something that I've always wondered about because Soraya and I, one of the things that we really enjoy about the band's music is the harmonies with the vocals. And Mickey, I was always wondering, how did you guys come up with those harmonies? What did Michael have an idea, or you just came up with your own harmonies, or?
Usually, well, it depends. Sometimes Michael would, you know, he'd have a melody, and so I'd usually sing over him, above him, and then we'd put Lewis below him. Usually, I kind of worked out harmonies, something I had done in the Top 40 band, and also when I'd studied music in high school. Although sometimes Michael might say, you know, Mickey, try singing something like this above me, or, you know, so it was kind of it just depended on the song, you know. Different people had different ideas, but normally we had Michael singing in the middle, me above him, and Lewis below.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And also in the studio, Earl helped us with the harmonies too, as well. So we had the, you know, sometimes the four of us, you know, working out stuff, and we tried different things. You know, sometimes Michael would sing a harmony with himself. Sometimes it would be just me and Michael. There's a cool thing talking about harmonies. On My Own, at the ending of that song, it's basically Michael singing the melody and me harmonizing above him, and then Earl had us sing that same part over about 20 times, and he recorded it 20 different times. So you get,
well, that's where the 15 Tambourines reference came from.
And we're singing the exact same notes each time we tracked it. And then he layered all the tracks together, and it has this real airy, breathy sound to the voices. It's only two vocal lines, and we're just singing the same vocal line over and over. Because he re-recorded them so many times, it makes it sound really airy and breathy. So he would do little effects like that and suggest things like that. You know?
Another thing he was big on was space on a record. He would say, like, you know, where does everything sit on a song? You know, he didn't want things to be like you were mudding things up. So there'd have to be, you know, guitars here, where's the keyboard notes going to be, as opposed to the vocals, opposed to the drums. He would very much, that was where he get very analytical, and he would discuss, because Earl sort of was a triple threat. You know, he's a musician, he's an engineer, and he's a producer. So he can kind of come to you from any of those angles, and he's going to win in terms of, like, just, not that it's a win or lose thing, but just like, well, where do you want to put this? You know, because he was very into sonics, you know, how things would sit on
acoustics.
You know, that was very important.
Yeah, he's of the school of less is more. You know,
don't
overcrowd your tracks. You know, keep things, have one great guitar part, and if you want to have lots of guitar, you know, that you can hear when you're listening to the song, don't put on 5 guitars, put on one guitar and work on the intricacies of that one part, and make that just one great sounding track.
Oh,
and then you have your drums and bass underneath it, and that's your guitar work, so less is more. He would say that the record a song, or the track you're recording for a song, is like a bucket, and you can only put so much into the bucket until it's filled up. So you don't want to overfill it. Sometimes the guitar or the keyboards can eat up the acoustic areas where the voices are, or something like that. So he'd sometimes have, if you listen on my own, at the very beginning, the guitar plays a guitar riff for the intro, but then when this voice comes in for the verse, the riff doesn't play over the voice singing. When the voice stops singing, then the guitar riff plays.
Discussing the reasons why I must go. Let's think of the fun and not the sorrow. And I, alright, every day until of my love. And I'll tell where I'll be. Will you think of me? I have left tracks too hard to follow.
He would keep things more sparse, because then you keep things sparse and basic, you can add reverb, and you can add all whatever things you want to the track, and it sounds, and you make the things that are there sound really big. If you overcrowd stuff, it can sound just like mush, where nothing is distinctive anymore.
Right. There'll be a lot of instruments on a track, but how they're used is very sparsely and separated. If you actually go back and listen, you go, oh. And also
Yeah.
on my own, you have to remember Needle, Shade, and Pine.
I'm on my own through forest, needle, shade, and pine. And there still lingers thoughts of you on my mind. Thoughts of mine.
Which is an in-joke, because Michael says that line, and I used to give him crap about it. So usually, like live, when he would say Needle, Shade, and Pine, I'd usually lightly hit a cymbal right afterwards. It would be like an in-joke
I'll
about.
never live that down.
It was like sort of a band thing, It wasn't like I disliked what he was singing. It was just like, he just those words, Needle, Shade, and Pine, and I would like just do like a crap. It was very much just so,
Hey, if you walk through the forest, you're going to see needles, shades, and pine.
you let you down there. No, absolutely.
On my own through forest.
No, I'm trying to think. Fall to the Ground. What are the songs that we not mentioned?
well, we were talking about Soraya is a huge fan of When Lightning Starts.
Oh yeah, yeah.
With the horns. I kind of hear a little bit of Supremes in that, and I know Michael was a big fan of that. Could have that
It
been
was.
any kind of influence?
I think it was. Yeah. I mean, Lewis came up with pretty much the chord pattern for that, and started playing it for Michael. And Michael said, "Yeah." He said, "I started writing something that was either." Michael was a big fan of Diana Ross and the Supremes for sure. And he said he started thinking Motown and what kind of what would the vocal do over a chord pattern like that, over kind of a soulful a soul type funky riff like that. What would the voice do? And that's what he came up with. That was his kind of to me, actually, the riff sounded a little bit like Casey and the Sunshine Band when it was on guitar.
Well, and
So-
instrumentation. I mean, we don't.
But-
Not like it's like.
But Casey and the Sunshine Band were Motown influenced anyways. So
Yeah, but I mean, like the drumming and stuff and the bass playing, it's very much like much more closer to a soul track. I mean, we're not trying to play like some
Yeah.
like record. It's got the hi-hat beats, and again, and live we would use the hi-hat beat to open because it gets people's attention. But and then it has all the, we'd have all these like which are very much, we weren't using, that wasn't a rock tradition at all. We were definitely using that for, we used it there, and then we used it on
So that it was kind of like if you listen to that track, it's kind of like a rock band doing, their interpretation of a soul type song. And that beginning that you're talking about, I remember and they were holding that note there, and I said, you got to do something in between there. So I thought of the song, Best of My Love by the Emotions, that ba-da, ba-da, and I said, you guys do something like this in there, and they did. I showed them that stuff in there, and that's what ended up on the song. So
In the morning when you see that girl in her world, will that make the loving start? Or do you take the time to do the things and do these things, making sure you'll never part? Never part. We already know why. We already know why. The lightning starts from your heart. We already know why. We already know why. The lightning starts in the evening when you dance with her, when music's heard. Does that make life all
that song always would get a good response. And I remember KNAC used to play that song a lot.
Yeah, we played. I mean, that was a song that and Stupid Einstein were on our set for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
wanted them to be in the set. So
One I remember getting a letter and somebody wrote in and said, my favorite part of 16 Tambourines is on when lightning starts, when Michael goes, woo.
Soraya, that's Soraya. Soraya sings that whenever
I've heard it live. I automatically place it in there. No one else is doing it, but I do it. It's
I thought, yeah, that's the best part of the whole record. I thought that's awesome.
We already know why. We already know why. The lightning starts from your heart. We already know why. We already know why.
but that also showed the joy of that track, and there was no. I mean, there's no songs on that record where I think we overthought, like, except for Michael and Lewis deciding Around the World shouldn't be on the record, which was their own decision. There wasn't anything where where we battled in any way about trying things or doing things or making the record that it was. It sort of became sonically that record. And even if we had kept Around the World, it still would have been much more of an acoustic based record than there's no song that's all out aggressive. I mean, that's why when I look at Arrive Without Traveling, it's much more Lewis's baby in terms of, like, he gets his way on a lot of guitar stuff there.
yeah, I could definitely hear that. It's more of a guitar based album. But 16 Tambourines is so dynamic. I mean, there's so much going on with it. I mean, to me, it's a masterpiece. But a couple songs we haven't mentioned, And So We Run, there's a lot of ambience to that track. And from what I'm hearing, maybe Earl had a lot to do with that, like giving it space.
Yeah, I would think. Mickey?
Trying to think, that song to me was very much the whole kind of feel of, like, the 60s sort of a new counterculture, new things going on, and that sort of thing. And Michael had pretty much, that was I think he'd had both the verse and the chorus. And when he started singing the verse, I just started hitting some chords to "We Are Young," bum, 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 following what he was doing. And then as when the chorus comes in, Lewis came up with his guitar part. And Earl put on some sound effects and things like that. You hear this kind of like swirly sounds and stuff like that. And that's, as I recall, that's Lewis working with the chorus on the Roland JC 120 and getting feedback and stuff like that. So we might have had, I think we did a track with him just playing around and getting, having the feedback sounds weave in and out and that kind of thing. And
Mickey, are you referring to like even before the vocals come in, there's kind of a
right.
Okay.
Right. You hear that. That's from the chorus of the Roland JC 120. And he must have turned up the volume to get it to feed back a little bit, but it was using the chorus, cranked, to get that. And it's also in the song itself. It is in the beginning, like you said, but it's in the song itself too. Although when the band starts playing, you don't hear it as much.
We are young, we have no fear. Take the old drum in our ears, 'cause what they say is what we never hear today. And so we run, we've begun to think as we want to, and we've begun to do as we want to, and we've begun every day, a summer's day and at night.
But yeah, Earl got, sound effects like that. And also at the end of the solo on In My Own Time, where the guitar goes. Earl added that.
Yeah, he owned
sound
up
effect
the end of that.
Yeah. So Earl added all these little things, and it was kind of maybe Lewis was messing around with it, and Earl said, let's use that. So they it just all, each of us were throwing ideas out and saying, try this, try that, or whatever, and Earl was kind of running the ship and organizing it all.
Wow.
And on my own, and I'm not on my own. And So We Run, those verses are very empty. It's like ding, ding, ding. I'm like hitting the bell of a cymbal. They're very,
And So We Run, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So a lot of these, you see the spaces, but you don't really think about it. But they're there. But it's sort of like.
It's a little bit like a Left Bank type thing. It's with harpsichord and everything like that, and it's a little bit like the Stones' Satanic Majesty's Request, and that's Michael loves that kind of stuff. That's his realm that he loves to explore and that sort of thing. So.
So Mickey, would you play with different sounds to come up with, because there's a few different sounds that you have throughout the album. I was wondering about Tomorrow, but it sounds like that Earl had that keyboard in the next room. But
right.
How would you come up with sounds that you would pick for the songs? Would you experiment?
That was a tough part, because I wasn't sure where to put what sounds to use sometimes and where to fit them in to a band that, to me, like the foundation of the band was drums, bass, and guitar. So I wasn't always sure. So what I would do was I was working with the Prophet 5 and also later on the Prophet 5 as well as Yamaha DX7. And after rehearsal, I'd stay, when the rest of the band left, I would stay back and I would just spend time coming up with different sounds on the synthesizer, and you'd come up with, different types of keyboard sounds, harpsichord, maybe different electric piano, or some sounds were not specifically like a piano or harpsichord or whatever, but they sounded sort of keyboardish, and then you'd also try to come up with sound effects, and you'd also try to come up with string sounds and pads. So I would just try different things, and I'd maybe play some of the song on each of the different sounds, and maybe try to work out what I would play using a certain sound or whatever, and maybe then try that on 5 other different sounds. So just kind of, I spent a lot of time just thinking about just, what types of sounds to use. That was one part of my, private rehearsal. Another part would be, once they introduced, Lewis and Michael introduced the song, then what would I play? I had the sound, I knew the song. Now, what things would I play? Would I start soloing here? Would I play chords there? So I'd spend a lot of time doing that. And then I'd also spend separate time just trying to come up with songwriting myself. So try to come up with a chord pattern or a riff or a melody. So I basically had 3 different areas I would work on, just writing songs, trying to figure out what I would play on songs that were introduced by Michael and Lewis, and then trying to come up with different sounds that I would then save on the synthesizer. And as they would introduce ideas, then I'd punch around to the different sounds I'd save and just try that sound, try this sound that I saved last night, and just kind of experiment,
Did you play Earl's didn't he have a Baldwin organ?
What's that?
Did Earl have a Baldwin organ? Was that what he had?
The organ stuff that I used, I actually brought in a Korg CX3, which was a portable organ. And it's like a rectangular box. It's real lightweight. It's like about 15 pounds or maybe even less. And that's what I played the solo for Around the World on. It sounds like a Hammond, and then I also used, I did other organ sounds on the Prophet, like the Farfisa sound on Sorry is on the Prophet, and then run through Roland jazz chorus to get a like a Leslie type effect. I don't know that Earl had. I can't remember Earl had.
Earl had the Baldwin organ, and he had the piano.
Yeah, I played the tack piano on Tomorrow, but he had.
I thought it was the Baldwin. It might have been another brand. I thought.
Right. Yeah. Mostly, I got the organ sounds on the keyboards that I had.
Okay.
And I tended to play a lot of organ. I tended to play a lot of, it was real basic at times. Piano, organ, harpsichord, and strings. But of course, those are such fundamental sounds that those are good places to start.
I do play the Baldwin organ on the Fate of As Real as Real.
What?
Yes.
The keyboardist Danny Benair.
The Fate of As Real as Real. You'll hear right at the end. There's this really weird sounding organ, and that's actually me.
Wow.
That's you. That has the tack piano on it too. Some of the low notes in the piano at the end of the song.
That's true.
So that's the same piano on tomorrow.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
piano.
So
Yeah.
Mickey, you're mentioning that. I mean, a lot of the songs are guitar, drum, and vocal based, but tomorrow is, I mean, that's primarily you.
That's true. And so is like, and so we run starts off with the keyboard as well. And so does Fall to the Ground starts off with the keyboard. Now Lewis wrote Lewis wrote the music to Fall to the Ground, and he wrote it on piano. So he showed it to me, and I played basically, what he wrote. So
He
I
had a
mean,
piano in his rumpus room, Lewis. So I know
Yeah.
it sounds funny,
Yeah.
but that's what we.
So, but you're right. I mean, I think on 16 Tambourines, the keyboards, do take a lot of are dominant in a lot of ways, and that's the way Earl would work. He'd first get the drum track, then the bass. Would he get the? Actually, he'd do the drums and then he'd do the vocals. He'd do after the drums, and he just had.
We probably did the rhythm tracks, Michael and I together with a scratch vocal.
We would do just a scratch track with the band playing in a scratch vocal, and the main thing was to get a good feel and to get the drum track.
But
once he had
we recorded, the tracks were recorded very fast. We didn't waste a lot of time on not way,
right.
Yeah.
But they came
Yeah,
down.
Danny was a quick study, that's for sure, and in laying down the drum tracks. But then once he got the drum track, then the next thing Earl would do was lead vocal and harmony vocals, because he wanted to hear where the vocals were so that the instruments wouldn't cover them up.
Wow.
So once he got the drums and the lead vocal and the harmonies, then he'd say, is this going to be dominant guitar on this track or dominant keyboard? Whichever one was dominant, that's the one he'd do first, because then after you've got the dominant instrument, then when you put the other instrument on, you're not going to step on any toes. You're not going to step on the toes of the dominant instrument or the vocals. So if a song was say mainly guitar dominating, the keyboards would be done last, and they'd have to find spaces where they could fit in and not step on what the guitar was doing. And that's how you had, the guitar, being the strong part of the track and the keyboards maybe more, effects or whatever, but if it was keyboard based, you'd start with the keyboards first.
But what he's saying is true. Like when this isn't with Mickey, but when we did the 3x4 record, we did Tell Me When It's Over. That's Michael's scratch vocal that ends up being used. Earl said that is great. And then I think maybe he changed a couple words and played with a tune a little bit on a couple words because he could with Pro Tools. But I think it's the take that we do when Michael and I lay down the track. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. That is.
Yeah, I mean,
Jet Fighter has actually kind of both keyboards and guitar, kind of 50-50.
Yeah,
really. There's strong guitars and there's an incessant keyboard part all the way through there as well.
I mean, Mickey, you're doing that arpeggio part on the keyboard, and it's that's a huge part of that song.
Right. And that was Lewis's riff. Lewis came up with that, and that's, but it's also dominating, or it's also, like I said, if you listen, you hear his chord riffing as well, which is like one of my favorite guitar tracks that he does is the chord riffing on Jet Fighter.
Wow. Yeah, and so I think we mentioned earlier, that's the song that a lot of people know the band know the band by. I mean, that track is on several compilations, right?
Well, we've actually licensed it a few times. It's actually made us a little bit of money. So
nice.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions before we let you go.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of sequencing, and you guys have mentioned that it sounded like everything was pretty amicable. Was sequencing pretty amicable, and how did that come about? And why is the track listing incorrect on the back of the album? Why is it not in order?
which copy is that?
Japanese.
Well, maybe is the American one incorrect?
It's the same way.
Oh, well, everything with that record's incorrect. The cover is incorrect. What do you mean?
Okay. This one too?
Well, it's horrible.
Cover, what should the cover have been?
I mean, the whole,
What track is out of sequence? Which one?
So you start off with Jet Fighter, so it starts off there, but then it goes On My Own. Seeing is Believing is the third track that's listed. They're not.
Oh, that's weird.
It's not numerically listed. It's just listed. And I was just wondering if there was any thought to that, the way that it's listed.
the thing that came when it came to the artwork, I don't recall the record having a lot of issues with the order it ended up with, Seeing is Believing ending and everything. But the artwork, which is sort of been a bane with a lot of people, it became this thing the other day on Facebook. But we did a photo session and we looked at it on Lisa Fancher's wall. It just was like bam, bam, bam. We were going on the road. We'd already done the Baroque Down tour, which was really successful. We were doing a bigger tour, and again, it was a lot more dates. We were going to be out longer. And we looked at the artwork and the photo on the wall. I don't know. We picked that one. I don't know why, but we did. And it looked good on the wall. But you're just looking at something on a wall. So what happens is we don't even get a proof. It sort of goes from like, okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. To like,
if we would have put it on the carpet, we might have realized it wasn't that good instead of the wall.
So with the record, I think we thought the photo would be the top would be dark, blending into like where it came from.
It did have a certain lighting. It did seem to have a certain lighting as we were looking at the at the proofs. They were running slides on the wall to show proofs of the photo session, and we saw this kind of weird lighting and stuff like that. But when you put it on the record, the lighting that we thought we saw was not there.
But I remember I was at Lisa's house when she got the records, and I called Michael, and I think we were leaving on tour like the next day. Seriously, it was something like that. It was like really fast. I mean, so we never saw a proof. We just saw photo on wall, record in hand.
Wow.
And I said, and I called Michael and I said, I have the cover here. And he goes, yeah. And I said, it's a dartboard. And I go, what do you mean? I go, it's a dartboard.
It looks terrible.
And Michael has this sort of kind of funny, kind of nervous laugh. And I go, I'm not kidding. And he goes, what? I go, I'm not kidding. It looks like it should be a dartboard. And he had no idea how much I hated the cover until he saw it. And then when I've seen the whole photo session, there's 1,000 better photos. And it could have been done so much better if just the top had been in black and the writing had been different. We just ended up picking like one of the worst photos from the photo session.
Yeah.
But everything was like snap, 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 snap. So the writing, the back, the insert, Lisa wrote that. Michael didn't even say to write the Marty Van. It was supposed to be a picture of Martin Van Buren.
I like the inserts. Style into your rocking tunes by Marty Van Buren.
That was a Lisa decision. That wasn't a Michael decision. Michael,
oh, really? Okay, well, that was really clever, and that would have made a great cover too.
And Michael wanted Martin Van Buren, which he got.
You know why? I know why Michael wanted Van Buren. You know why?
Okay, we're listening.
Because I asked him, I said, why did we put Marty Van Buren? Michael looked at me and said, because he's a great dresser.
that makes perfect sense coming from.
That does.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the artwork was problematic. And then I think I actually posted like one of the reissues where I actually got them to use a different photo, which is a much better photo.
Yeah.
Kind of like Mickey's like, what are you guys doing over there?
I know. We were moving very quickly. And it got rushed together. And
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately,
that's like 1,000 times better, as is the other one, that the CD version.
Yeah.
I mean, compare them.
Yeah. And I actually, for all of its Baroque hoedown, for it being kind of, more primitive, I actually like the Baroque hoedown cover quite a bit.
The funny thing about Baroque hoedown, I love the Baroque hoedown cover, and I think
it's really cool. Yeah.
It really sums up the band at that moment. But
Yeah.
it's very funny. We go to do it, and it really means nothing now, but it's so funny at the time. We came dressed, and Lewis shows up and he goes, I forgot my boots. I have my tennis shoes. and he was so bummed. But really, it's great that he has his tennis shoes. But we had these. I had these very stylish Beatle boots that were like from the '60s that I bought, and modern. I bought them. They had never been used, but they were like '60s, and they zipped up the side. But Lewis forgot them. But it's great that he's wearing his tennis shoes. But that photo, I mean, that's exactly who we were at that moment. And I really love that cover. I love the artwork. I love the pagoda. I love the logo. I mean, that really, and the back where we're on the pond, all of that works for me. And
We didn't have a title for that record. And Earl had some of his record collection on the floor in the studio as we were recording. And I was looking through the collection, and I pulled out this record, and it was a Walt Disney record, and it said Baroque Hoedown. And I turned to Michael and I said, "How about that for the title of our record?" And Michael goes, "That's great." So,
and the weirder part of
it's off the Walt Disney record.
Wow.
But the weirder part, that is written by a songwriting team. The song Baroque Hoedown, it's the Main Street Electrical Parade song.
Right.
It's written by Perry and Kingsley. Gershon Kingsley, who was one of the writers, dated my mother before my dad.
No.
That's funny.
Wow.
It's also cool. I love titles like that mix two words that usually don't belong. For example, like Beggar's Banquet by the Stones. They mix these two words that normally don't sit together.
Well, when Earl comes up with the phrase 16 tambourines about the vocals, it's that same thing. It's like, I don't know who's ever used the phrase 16 tambourines,
Right. I remember Earl, it's so typical of Earl. Well, that sounds like 16 tambourines. And Michael said, "Oh, that's a great title."
But that's very Earl, Like the notes on the back is, it doesn't have a period. Like, what is it? The back of 16 tambourines. It's like,
what's that?
The back of 16 tambourines is quote. It's like,
the quote. He's saying about all the different ideas and all the minds, and he says, "Hurry before it melts." That's actually a movie.
No, but what's the whole phrase he says?
So he says 3 o'clock's best shimmering ever, more textures I've seen at once, like mini dramas, major explosions, swirling faces like they had 40 brains. Hurry before it melts.
Right. And that's a 60s movie, Hurry Before It Melts.
Yeah, but that whole combination is very Earl, the way he kind of just takes all these words and he thinks about the record. He's like, boom, boom, boom. And he's like, I think Lisa asked him to write a quote, and that's kind of what you have to do with Earl. You have to like, will you do this, Earl? And then Earl, okay. It's very Earl.
So to me, this is 16 Tambourines is like my Sergeant Pepper's. I think for some people, it's definitely overstating it, but that's how important this.
That's very nice, Jeff.
This record is extremely important to me. And the way you guys have described, as we've talked to you the last hour and a half, you guys, it sounds like you put that much effort into making it what it is. There was a lot of effort.
Dan Band had a lot of energy and excitement and creativity. And it was just like four young guys just, really, going after it, really had a lot of focus. Michael was great because he wanted everything done yesterday, So we're gonna record the record. We're gonna be on the road next week. Blah 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 blah. A lot of energy, and a lot of, like I said, Earl. We had the luxury to be able to just take our time and make it sound exactly as we wanted. So and that's what we did. We did,
It was not that Arrive Without Traveling, actually, we didn't have a good rapport because we were in another country.
We did have a good rapport on that record.
We were in another country and we worked in a whole different way, but there wasn't weird chemistry. I mean, it was very fun making the record for the four of us. We had a lot of fun. And at that moment, we really didn't see any reason why things weren't going well because there was no sign. We'd go and play a mod club. We think 200 people show up and there'd be 800. Every time we played, we were like, what's going on? Why are all these mods here? Why are all these kids dressed? I remember we played some club in Orange County and it was really small, but they packed like 500-600 kids in there. And I remember we got a couple encores and I had a green suit on and there wasn't an inch of it that wasn't wet. And Mickey had to catch me from passing out.
Wow.
And then we went into they had a walk-in freezer And we walked in there and they said, you got to do an encore. So we stood in there for like a minute or two. And then we came out because, it was like, oh, wow. God. I woke up.
I think that
But it was
I
like
think that was Radio
very
City.
unreal at that moment because
I think that was Radio City in Anaheim.
it might be. It was
Radio City in Anaheim. 16 Tambourines, Jeff. It was 4 guys, and we were able to just do whatever we wanted to do and take our time and do it. And with a good conductor of the band, a great producer and engineer who allowed us to do what we wanted to do. We didn't have any record company. Lisa just from Frontier, who ran Frontier, just go in and make a record. And we were able to, we had no interference. We were just young guys and we did whatever we wanted to do and had the freedom to do it.
And
that's the result.
We would have stayed with Earl. We were always kept from working with Earl.
Yeah, IRS wanted something more commercial radio. But although I think in its way, I think 16 Tambourines has a lot of commercial potential. And had we stayed with Earl, we would have progressed to a certain degree as well. Anyways, when we made Arrive Without Traveling, the band was really playing a lot together and rehearsing a lot. We're very tight on that record on Arrive Without Traveling. We're playing really well, although we play really well on 16 Tambourines as well.
But I mean,
also,
I felt that when we went to do Arrive Without Traveling, they wanted to sign us because of 16 Tambourines, because of Jet Fighter, but they didn't want us to record with that guy who recorded in a house. But that guy got us on the radio. No, but you can't record with
that's
that guy in a
true.
house.
And when we told that to Earl goes, well, I figured they wouldn't. And that's typical of record companies too. You do something and then they want you, but then they don't want you to do what you already did. They want you to put you through their what they think you need to do to get you on the radio. So, and that happens.
And that was why when we did 3x4, not with Mickey, but when we did 3x4, I was adamant that we should be able to go back to Earl, and they were like, "Go anywhere you want." And we were like,
yeah, that's smart choice.
Yeah.
And it was great because it was fun. I don't know if we'll ever record again. Maybe we will, but we probably will never record with Earl again if we do. But
yeah.
So
if the band had chemistry of the chemistry of the 4 guys with Earl, we had nearly a 5th member of the band as we worked with him, who would just fit with us so well and was so helpful to us.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy, and I'm glad that I can call him my friend, and that's important.
So he sounds like, to me, going back to the Sgt. Pepper's analogy, he's like the George Martin equivalent.
Yeah.
In a way. And he also, Danny, he also worked with, once we had recorded Broke Hoedown, he then produced, I think, Long Rider's record, and maybe did he do Thin White Rope? And he did several other bands started going to him. What's that?
I don't think he did Thin White Rope, but yeah, I mean, Earl. I mean, when I worked with him in the Quick, I think we might have been the first band he got a production credit on, and that sort of led him to getting a lot more work, which is fantastic. He deserved it, and he had a great studio at Brother, and then when we did Broke Hoedown, it led him to getting a lot more people because they heard that record. Which everybody should be working with Earl, but yeah. I always wish we worked with him again. Prior to 3x4, every time we tried to get back there, and we were always like, nope, can't do it. Sad but true.
All right. Well, you guys, we've already had you for an hour and a half. I have one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I don't mind.
So we're coming up. It's hard to believe because you guys don't look like this is even possible, but we're coming up on 40 years of celebrating this album. It's almost the 40th year anniversary. Here in a couple years away, 1 or 2 years away. Any last thoughts, looking back on it, looking at it now? Any last thoughts about 16 Tambourines as a much more mature person? How do you feel about it looking at it now, almost 40 years later?
Well, I mean, I guess I spoke first. I genuinely feel the same about it. I feel it's, and I can say it from being in the band or looking at it. I think it's probably the most crafted record we make, even though Arrive Without Traveling I really like. I think that there isn't wasted space on it. And I just love the fun we had making it and how it gelled and the camaraderie amongst the five of us. There's something about that. I don't look back at it and have disappointment in any way. Like, oh, but if we had had it, oboe on that.
Right.
Yeah, I look at it the same way, still the beaver, leave it to beaver. I enjoyed it back then and I enjoy it today, so it was a lot of fun to make and it's still a lot of fun to listen to.
Yes. We agree wholeheartedly. So I have one last question.
Okay.
So I want to know, are we ever going to hear Visions of Airplane Fairs? We know that cassette exists.
Oh, well,
The 40th year reissue, 40th anniversary reissue.
I would rather that it got recorded for real. The cassette is just a really crappy cassette. It's the three of us and it's sort of shabby, but
We're okay with that too.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm sure. No, it's got a lot of it's got some of the potential there, but I mean, if we did it now, it would sound like a 3 o'clock then because it really is an old song. And it's got Lewis has cool guitar picking in it.
Yeah, it's nice.
So I think if it was actually recorded now, it could be done with justice as opposed to a shabby cassette in my parents' garage with the three of us with a mic hanging somewhere and vocals not really being in tune and
Yeah, it's in rough form right now on just rough rehearsal form, but whether you hear it or not, that's up to Danny and Michael.
Mickey for his own choice doesn't have much say in the 3 o'clock, but
I don't have a copy of it anyway, so although I remember the song.
Mickey, I have one last question for you, and it's just to satisfy.
We keep saying that, Soraya.
Just to satisfy my own curiosity. Okay. Was the beginning riff, to me, it sounds like a farfisa. Is that the prophet on when lightning starts, where you go da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na,
yeah,
da-na-na-na?
Yeah, that's the farfisa sound on the prophet. Yeah, and originally that was going to be played on guitar. But Earl wanted something different. I think he felt that was too much like another record, and so I said, well, we got to have that riff in there. So the spotlight turned to the keyboard, and so I ended up playing kind of very similar riff to what the guitar was playing on the farfisa sound on the prophet.
I love that sound. I love.
Yeah.
Yep. That's why he's Mickey.
What's that?
I said that's why you're Mickey.
And then when we did it live, I would say, Lewis, go ahead. We're not in the studio anymore. Play your guitar part, and I'll just chord through it. So we kind of revert to that live.
Jeff, I think we can talk about this album over and over and over. But first of all, I know our listeners have enjoyed this, and we want to thank Danny Benair and Mickey Mariano. And Mickey, we would just like to leave an invitation to, we'd love to talk about A Ride Without Traveling with you. This has been really fun and super informative. So just know that you're always welcome back, and we'd love to talk with you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks. Good seeing you guys.
All right. Don't forget, 40th year anniversary coming up.
I know. You might see it on. You might see a reissue. Who knows?
Danny, you can blow out the candles.
Yeah,
wait. Are we jumping over what Danny Benair just said? Could you?
Yeah, we are. We're jumping over.
All right. But oh my gosh, thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Danny.
Thank
you.
You're
welcome. Take care.
Take care.
We really appreciate it. All right. Have a good one, you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh my gosh, Soraya.
Give me a moment. Give me a moment. I hope everybody out there is just agog. Mickey Mariano, the unicorn himself.
Thank you, Danny Benair.
Thank you, Danny Benair. And Seriously, thank you, Mickey Mariano. I learned a bunch about this album, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah. It was great having both of them on there that
Yeah.
so they could feed off of each other. Soraya, when I go back to edit this, I kept noting that there were so many quotable moments in this discussion that would make for any the selling of any book. Just there was a couple quotes in here about some of these songs, about the album. Mickey talking about 16 Tambourines, generally speaking. Danny Benair's memory, right? I mean, he's the band's archivist. Our first interview from anybody from the Paisley Underground was Danny Benair.
Thank
So
you.
we owe Danny so much.
I
In
mean,
fact,
just eternal gratitude, but also, Jeff, I'm still floating.
yeah. And I'm not joking, Soraya, and it's not hyperbole when I say that this album, 16 Tambourines, is definitely in my top 5 most important albums. You know, Radio Tokyo is huge to me. But this is literally, you know, Beatles are my favorite band. Literally, this album is more important to me than Sgt. Pepper's or any Beatles album. I've listened to this more than anything. So hearing some of these stories about these guys in the studio and putting this together, and Soraya, like learning from the two of them, Earl Mankey's role in putting this album together, it's amazing. And like you said, we've learned so much today.
To me, what Mickey said about Earl, that Earl loved to work with young bands and help them grow. And I absolutely agree. When you watch the transition from Salvation Army, Baroque Hoedown, and then you get into 16 Tambourines. And then when you compare 16 Tambourines, which was kind of this ascension, with Arrive Without Traveling, you hear two very different bands. You hear two different bands, two different sounds, and I just love the fact that Earl gave them a chance to kind of experiment. And experimenting with the sounds, okay? Earl's kid crying, you know, boom. Earl's wife coming in with groceries into the kitchen where Danny was laying down. You know, it's just, to me, it's like all this really funky layering of sounds that I thought were different. I think that's the word. I thought they were different, and now I'm finding out that they're completely not what I thought they were. But like, I think Danny used the word just like a happenstance, just something that happened, and Earl said yes. Like that little blip at the beginning of Jet Fighter, I thought that was intentional.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then here we find out it's like, no, that was a mistake. That wasn't supposed to be there. But Earl said, yeah, leave it in. And then that, so now I'm never going to think of that the same.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Soraya, we got a few answers from our previous episode when we just did the album focus. I'm thinking specifically when we're talking about A Day in Erotica and learning about a couple things, the way the song was put together. But can you believe that they used a cassette tape from Mickey Mariano's
at 14? Mickey at 14, lead singer.
You can't all fit in.
You can't all fit in. I can't get you all in.
I can't get you all in. I can't get you all in. I can't get you all in.
I am just blown away. And the thank you. Oh my God. I'm gonna thank Danny Benair for forever. But I can't say enough. Say enough about Mickey Mariano. Super generous with his time, his stories, but also kind of, you know, just giving us a bigger, just a bigger picture of what this album was. And I loved this little addition of the band history of how Mickey comes in and the way that Mickey worked. You know, talking to Danny first, I have an idea. And then he comes in and is like, yes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've talked about the camaraderie of all four of them.
Yes.
specifically in recording this album, but what about that special camaraderie between those two, between Danny and Mickey, coming in as the seasoned, I mean, we're only talking early mid-20s, but they're the seasoned guys and coming in with the experience. I mean, when you think about like mid-20s and an 18 and 19-year-old, now, I mean, my wife and I are 8 years apart. So, I mean, you're talking 6 years apart, whatever. As adults, you know, in our 40s and 50s, doesn't seem like a lot, but an 18-year-old and a 24, 25-year-old, that's a big difference. There's a lot of experience that happened in those years that Danny and Mickey brought to the band.
Right.
And then you had this fresh energy that they're talking about from Michael and Louis, and the way that all blended together.
That to me, I think, was a piece of the puzzle that I didn't realize until Mickey kind of explained it that way. You know, Danny and I had more experience. Louis and Michael were younger, but when they came together, you know, Mickey said we were bringing some experience so we could kind of teach or, you know, guide a little bit these two younger people who were kind of working it out. But I loved how Danny put it. Said when Mickey came to the band, he upped the game, and Louis met him. And when you hear Louis Gutierrez play guitar, and you hear him on 16 Tambourines, you go, you said it. You wonder if they're the same person from, you know, Salvation Army, but it just shows growth, right? But it was leading from within. And like, you know, Danny said, Mickey upped the game, Louis met him there, and then kind of experimented on his own. And we've heard Michael, you know, his vocals, the songs he wrote, you know, and he's a genius on that bass. And so
absolutely,
we hear this band really kind of mesh and come to it's really a joy. Reissues, Danny kind of glossed over it, did not want to repeat it, but he said it towards the end. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I think a reissues, and can you just imagine, we already love it, but reissued with probably some remastering.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're looking at the dates here. I mean, it came out in October 1983. Here we are in we're
skipping a jump.
Fall. I mean, we're fall 2021. I mean, a couple years away. We need to start planning for this.
Oh no, we need an event. We need
an event. Yeah.
But also, how amazing Earl Mankey. You know that he was like this fifth member. That's what Danny said. But Earl Mankey can just literally, it's like cherry picking great moments. You tell me on 3x4 that those are scratch vocals that Michael Curcio gives on Tell Me When It's Over. And it's brilliant. It's a beautiful listen. And they're scratch vocals.
Yeah, you know, several people, when we were talking about this when we did our 3x4 episode, that vocal is something that people actually mention as a highlight of that entire project, is Michael's vocal on that particular track, right? I mean, that several, Matt Piucci has mentioned it, Vicky Peterson mentioned it,
right?
We've seen fans have mentioned that Joy has mentioned it.
It's her favorite song off of it.
Yeah, and that particular vocal is a highlight of that project, and it's a scratch track that Michael and Danny recorded with Earl, and Earl, here's Earl saying, we're going to use this. We're going to use this.
And look, and it's lovely. It's wonderfully done.
Amazing. Yeah.
And see, Jeff, I'm not the only one that screamed woo when lightning starts.
Yeah.
Write a fan letter to it, but you know, hats off to the person who did.
Yeah.
Man, 16 Tambourines is an important album for Jeff and I, and for 3 o'clock fans. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. I think Jeff and I can't stop smiling yet. So
no, we'll be referencing this for a while.
And Jeff, the door's open. I really hope we get to talk about another 3 o'clock album with Mickey. It's so informative. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And if not, we've learned a lot today.
It was a joy. Today was it was great. It was a thrill. And
Absolutely.
he satisfied my curiosity. Not a farfisa, profit.
I'm not familiar with that. So
Look, he experimented with so many different sounds and brought so many. I
Yeah.
noted 3 pieces of equipment that he talked about. Talked about the Korg.
yes.
Sorry, I have it over here. He talked about a Prophet 5, a Yamaha DX7, and a Korg CX3. None of which I know about, but
Yeah.
he said it,
How
so I
does
wrote
that
it down. Now I want to look it up. Oh boy, Jeff. Oh, I don't know. What else can we say?
We're in heaven right now.
Woo! Thank you again, Danny Benair and Mickey Mariano.
Yes, thank you both.
Ah.
And thank you, Danny, for making this happen.
Mi
We appreciate
gente
it.
a grubiar.
Groove on, Paisley people. Don't thank us. Thank Danny Benair.
And Marty Van Buren, a great dresser.
Three words, Soraya. Worth the wait.
Hell yes.
Love songs.